Yesterday, Sayadaw explained the meaning of Bhavana. In the past also, Sayadaw had explained, but not so much in detail. Bhavana means developing, cultivating the qualities or the strength in the mind. One should develop the mental strength that has not arisen, and one should cultivate it so that this mental strength will become stronger and more developed and increased. So when this mental strength become developed, cultivated, they will become from small to big, from tender to ripe, from less to many. By developing, cultivating these mental strength sufficiently, the mind will become mature, and one develops spiritual resistance, able to withstand opposite states. When one has reached maturity, there will be spiritual resistance. Practicing Satipatthana meditation is to develop, to cultivate the controlling faculty so that one will reach the stage of maturity. So if one does not practice, one's body, speech and mind will be left uncontrolled. If one lacks mindfulness, if one lacks control, one will think that unbeneficial things are beneficial. One will think unsuitable things as suitable. Thinking unbeneficial things as beneficial, one commits wrongdoing by body and speech. Having bad intentions, one will be deviated from the right path, and one will end up having harm and suffering. It is sure that when one is deviated from the right path, there will be harm. So Sayadaw compares this to the physical body. If the physical body lacks the necessary strength, it will not be able to withstand. There will not be physical resistance, and the person can easily catch illness. As the person also lacks the strength to repel the illnesses, the person becomes weak and fragile. In order to build up the physical stamina, physical resistance, one needs to take nutritious food, sufficient food. One needs to take care of one's body and taking care that it will be in moderate temperature, and one should inhale fresh air, one should take suitable food, and also do exercise and so on. If the person takes care of his or her body in this way, there will be fresh new materiality arising, and one will build up the physical stamina, physical resistance. In the same way, one also needs to nurture the mind with necessary spiritual nutrition. Just as when one takes nutritious food, the body will be fresh, alert, active. In the same way, one needs to energize the mind with necessary spiritual nutrition so that the mind will be strengthened and energized. In order to have spiritual resistance, one needs to practice Bhavana, and Sayadaw will explain what kind of mental strength that one should develop and cultivate, and what kind of benefits one can gain by developing, cultivating these mental strength. And Sayadaw will also explain how one can lose by failing to develop and cultivate the necessary mental strength. And Sayadaw will explain with giving examples. As a human being, not to hurt others physically or mentally, one needs to control oneself so that one will not make mistake. One needs to have the knowledge, understanding that one needs to control oneself. One needs to control one's bodily behavior, verbal behavior, and mental behavior so that these behaviors by body, speech and mind will not be wrong. In order to have a good control of oneself successfully, one needs spiritual strength. Lacking spiritual strength, one cannot control oneself. As a human being, it is important to have the ability to control oneself so that one will be true human. One needs to become a true human. One needs to have a humane mind, and one needs to have human knowledge. Only if one has the spiritual strength, one will be a true human, one will have a humane mind, and one will have human knowledge. Without the necessary mental strength, it is impossible. In the text, there are mentioned two kinds of strength. The first one is Paṭisaṅkhāna bala, power of reasoning, power of prudence. And the second one is Bhavana bala, power of mental development. The first one, Paṭisaṅkhāna bala, is the power of reasoning, power of prudence. Whenever one is about to do something, whenever one is about to talk something, whenever one has something to think about, whether it is for oneself or for others, one should think whether one's action, one's speech or one's mind is something that is beneficial or not. So in this way, one should think before one acts before one talks, before one thinks whether it is beneficial or not. Even if it is beneficial, one should think whether it is suitable or not. One should not just do things eagerly, thinking that it will be beneficial, but one should really think whether it is something suitable or whether it is something possible to do. So one should make a list what is beneficial to do, and from the list one should pick out the one which is most suitable and which is most possible. So from the things that are beneficial, one should do things that are suitable and that are possible. So if one can do that, one has fulfilled Patisankhana Bala. One is complete with the power of reasoning, power of prudence. Among the 4 kinds of sambhajanya, among the 4 kinds of right understanding, Patisankhana Bala is taken as Sathaka Sambhajanya, the comprehension about what is really beneficial, and Sappaya Sambhajanya, comprehension, understanding what is really suitable. So one should think before one acts, before one talks, before one thinks, whether or not it is beneficial, whether or not it is really suitable. And also this kind of sambhajanya, clear comprehension, is useful also in the Dhamma field. This knowledge is also called Parihariya Panya, the knowledge, understanding what should be avoided, what should be done, the knowledge, understanding what are beneficial, what are harmful, so that one can avoid harmful things and one can perform beneficial things. In other words, such kind of knowledge is also called Nepaka Panya, mature knowledge. Every time one is about to do something, one should really do it only if it is really beneficial, suitable, and possible. So in this way, one should develop, cultivate this kind of knowledge so that such kind of knowledge will become from small to big, from tender to ripe, from less to many. When one has developed this kind of knowledge, there will be maturity and one builds up Patisankhana Bala, power of reasoning, power of prudence. So Patisankhana Bala is essential for everyone, not only for Buddhists, but it is essential for everyone of any belief, any religion. And also a person who does not even have a religion needs to have Patisankhana Bala, power of reasoning, power of prudence. So as a human being, it is important that one is humane and one needs power of reasoning. One should have power of reasoning from what has experienced, whether it is beneficial or not, whether it is suitable or not. As a human being, one needs to have a humane mind, and one needs to think what one should do in order to become an outstanding person. What kind of mental strength are needed to become an outstanding person, and one needs to have the power of reasoning. What should be performed? What should be refrained? What things are beneficial? What things are harmful? What things are blameworthy? What things are blameless? What things are unwholesome? And what things are wholesome? So one should ponder with power of reasoning based on what is probable, what is possible. And if something is agreed by the wise that it is beneficial and suitable, one should accept it and one should decide it is right. And one should come to a decision. So based on the things that are worthy of faith and confidence, one should have faith in it, and one should do things that are beneficial, and one should have strong chanda in order to gain the benefits. And one should also have the courage. This courage is called viriya. Having the courageous effort, one should practice sati, samadhi and panya. One should fulfill mindfulness, concentration and wisdom. And when one is performing wholesome deeds, one should also have moral shame and moral fear from wrongdoings that can bring harm. When one has this mental strength, moral shame and moral fear, seeing that wrongful things are shameworthy and frightening, it will bring more benefit. So in this way, one should initiate, develop such mental strength, and one should cultivate so that this mental strength will be cultured, developed, mature, and strengthened. So when these mental strengths are developed, cultivated in one's mind, one also fulfills Bhavana Bala, power of mental development. In order to fulfill Bhavana Bala, one needs to practice. So one should have faith and confidence in the practice, and one should practice so that one gains Bhavana Bala. One should cultivate the mental strength, sada, faith and confidence, viriya, courageous effort, sati, mindfulness, samadhi, concentration, panya, wisdom, hiri, moral shame, and uttapa, moral fear. So one should develop and cultivate these mental strength so that these mental strength will become from small to big, from tender to ripe, from less to many. When these mental strength become mature, one has the ability, capability to govern and control oneself. When these mental strengths are energized, one will be able to control oneself. Having saddha, faith and confidence, the mind will not respond to things that are not worthy of faith and confidence. At times when one comes across things that are unworthy of faith and confidence, one will not respond to it. Having viriya, effort, one will have the courage to refrain from things that are wrongful, and one will have the courage to perform things that are beneficial. Having viriya, effort, one will not be committing wrongdoings. One will be having this courage to refrain from wrongdoings. Having sati, mindfulness, even if there are circumstances that can lead the person to be forgetful, but one will not be forgetful, having mindfulness present. Having samadhi, concentration, the mind will not be distracted, the mind will not scatter, but the mind will be calm, collected, and unified. Having knowledge, one has the understanding what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, and thus one will be performing wholesome deeds. Having knowledge, one will be mature, and one will also have spiritual stamina, spiritual resistance, able to withstand good and bad situations, good and bad conditions. Having moral shame, one will feel shameful to perform wrongdoings. Having moral shame, one withdraws from committing wrongdoings. One will be reluctant to do wrong things, and thus one will withdraw oneself from wrongdoing. So one will not be committing transgressions, and one will have a very good control of oneself. Having moral fear, one will also be having fear to perform wrongdoings. Having these mental strength, the mind will be energized, strengthened, mature, and thus one has the capability to control oneself. Practicing Bhavana is to develop, to cultivate these mental strength, so that these mental strength will become from small to big, from tender to ripe, from less to many. When the mind associates with these mental strength, the mind will be mature. Without these mental strength, the mind is weak and tender and inferior. When the mind associates with these mental strength, the mind will be mature. If the person leaves the mind uncontrolled, if the person leaves the mind without having any control, without reforming the mind will still be tender, weak, not able to repel, not able to withstand bad conditions, and the mind will not be mature. When the mind is mature, the mind can get easily agitated with good and bad conditions. So that's why it is important that one energizes one's mind with necessary mental strength. Practicing Satipatthana meditation is to strengthen one's mind with necessary mental strength so that one's mind will be mature, having spiritual resistance, able to withstand good and bad conditions. If the mind is left unshaped, unreformed, the mind is naturally small, tender, weak. So it is sure that the mind that is not reformed is naturally small, tender, weak, low, and it shows that it is lacking the necessary strength. It is deficient of mental strength, and thus it is incomplete and inferior and low class. If the mind lacks this mental strength, one will not be mature, and one will not be able to withstand good and bad conditions. The mind that is not reformed is immature, naturally immature, weak and tender. Usually people are spending their time seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. So these seeing, hearing are arising as a result of past deeds. So seeing, hearing are arising as a result of good and bad deeds done in the past. Not knowing that these are the resultants, not knowing the wholesome deeds or unwholesome deeds, one has deep-seated avijja, ignorance. Avijja means not knowing the truth and knowing wrongly. In this way, the person's mind will be having avijja, ignorance, not knowing the truth, knowing wrongly. Having avijja, the person craves for good things, and if one gets good things, one clings onto them, and they are wasting their time with these things. When a person is wasting one's time with craving, clinging, ignorance, it shows that the mind lacks Dhammoja, the mind is lacking the Dhamma nutrition. When the mind is lacking Dhamma nutrition, the mind is small, weak, tender, immature, and thus the mind will not have any spiritual resistance. The mind lacks spiritual stamina, and the mind is quick to respond. So the mind is naturally quick to respond. Seeing this, one should understand that one needs to have Dhammoja, Dhamma nutrition. Just as the body needs nutrition, in the same way, the mind also needs Dhammoja, Dhamma nutrition, so that the mind will not be inferior. The mind needs to be uplifted with Dhammoja. Understanding this, one needs to practice in order to fulfill the Dhammoja that is essential for the mind. If one knows that one's mind is small, tender, immature, one needs to practice Vipassana meditation to develop the mind so that the mind will be mature. If one does not reshape one's mind in time, the mind will still be tender. It cannot become mature automatically. So failing to reform one's mind, the mind will still be immature, and one is wasting one's time. One is wasting one's life. If one does not reshape one's mind, if the person is 25 years old, the mind will be 25 years tender. When the person is 50 years old, the mind will be 50 years tender and immature. And a person who is 70, not reshaping one's mind, his or her mind will be 70 years tender. So if the mind is immature, tender and weak, when she comes across desirable objects, lobha arises. Coming across undesirable objects, dosa arises. Saraji gives an example of fruits. Small, tender, unripe fruits cannot withstand the weather. In the same way, the mind that is immature, the mind that lacks Satipatthana practice, will not have spiritual resistance. Just as the tender fruit perishes when it is subject to extreme heat or cold, in the same way, immature mind will be ruined when the person comes across desirable objects. When coming across desirable objects, greed arises. Coming across undesirable objects, unpleasant objects, dosa arises. So weak, tender, immature mind is quick to respond, easily love and hate. It shows that the mind is weak and tender. So one should develop Bhavana Bala in order to make one's mind mature. If the mind is tender, weak, quick to respond, easily love, hate, and have ignorance, the person is wasting one's life, and his or her life will be not valuable, worthless. So, if the body is weak, one needs to take nutrition and vitamins. In the same way, when the mind is weak, one should develop Dhammoja, Dhamma nutrition. Understanding that one needs Dhamma nutrition, one should practice Satipatthana meditation. One should practice Satipatthana meditation so that one will be fulfilling Dhammoja, so that the mind will become from small to big, from tender to ripe, from less to many. When the person gains maturity, one's mind will not be quick to respond. The mind will not easily love or hate, but the person develops spiritual stamina, spiritual resistance. And the person also understands very well about his or her mind. So having the spiritual resistance, one will be able to withstand good and bad conditions. And Sayadaw will continue to explain how one should practice in order to develop spiritual resistance. And Sayadaw will also explain it with jhana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.